Hi and welcome everyone to King Arthur and Lady of the Lake. I'm joined here again as usual with the lovely Michael, and we are going to be talking today about, drumroll please, the dark side of the sisterhood.
Mm.
So I just think that this is such a potent subject and something really that needs to be spoken about, but it is very uncomfortable for me.
And I can observe your uncomfortableness. So the sisterhood, when we talk about the sisterhood, and next week's episode is going to be the dark side of the brotherhood. So we're going to do these back to back.
Mm,
And the sisterhood is really how women view each other and how they interact with each other, and some of the insecurities and feelings of inadequacies that are underneath and behind all of that, and how
mm,
that shows up on the surface in
mm,
terms of how women interact with each other.
mm.
So
Yeah, and I mean, what's really interesting, I think, is that we talk a lot about that, especially you and I, and in our work we talk about the dynamic between masculine, feminine,
mhm,
men, women, and how men with men, women with women, and then that kind of conversation around what men are like from women, and vice versa.
yep,
But then there's this misconception, I believe, that means that all women are in support of all women and all men are in support of all men,
not
and
always the
and
case,
that
is
is
it?
actually not the case. So as well as speaking into the difficulties that we express in genders around kind of masculinity and feminist movement and men's rights, etc., I think it's only fair to really discuss what happens within the gender that we're in.
Mhm,
So I know that I have had a lot of difficulty in my feminine friendships. Um, and I would say for sure there's been lots of parts of my life where I felt really quite frustrated. Um, I remember not so long ago when there was the Women's March after Trump was elected, and I everywhere was, women's marches all over the world. And I remember thinking, I don't feel like that. I don't feel like my sister's got my back. I don't feel like that when I go to the school, or when I go to when I was working in corporate or wherever that
mm.
was. I didn't feel that it was women supporting women. And I don't hear that being spoken about.
What do you think why do you think, based on your personal experience, that you feel like women don't really support women? Or maybe where you haven't felt supported by
Mm,
women?
mm. I think there's the shadow of all of us comes from insecurity.
Yep.
It comes from the concern that we're not as good as that person. And a lot of that goes back to beauty and how we appear to men.
Mhm.
There's a lot to be said for the sexual kind of connection between men and women as to then how women treat each other in that space. And then, as well, of course, there's a dynamic in the workplace about being seen to be successful, and this thing that when we say about men, being successful and having it all, women are incredibly um yeah, just there's this incredible push with women to have it all, and not just then to have it all, but to cope in it. So we
Yep.
talk about men not sharing their feelings and men not discussing how they feel. But for most women, you'll say, "How are you?" "I'm great." And they've got the kind of art project for their kids all sorted, and they're at work, and they're, top of the leadership board at work, and their house is beautiful and it's cleaned every time anybody goes around. There's not a thing out of place, and they're at the soccer thing with all the right oranges and whatever it is. Everything is like
But
everything's boxed up. It's happening, and look at me having it all, being it all, and I'm amazing. And
but
there's
what's
this,
happening under the surface, I wonder?
oh my
So
God, there's an unraveling. There's an unraveling because it's impossible to hold all of that without going, oh my God, like the kids had, we had a fight this morning, or I'm really stressed about my position at work, or I've
yep.
had an argument with my partner, or I'm going through a divorce, or whatever it is. And I'm really finding it difficult to show up here or there. And, there's squabbles with friendships, etc. I mean, it's impossible to constantly be fine. And
Mm,
so what happens in that is then there's this kind of worry that it's going to be busted wide open. And what I see happening is in the workplace, for example, women don't want other women to succeed at all. I was talking to this incredible lady that I met the other day, and she was talking about how she's in a very male populated industry. And this other lady joined, and she was like, great, because we're outnumbered. There's only a couple of women in this whole organization holding these roles. And yet this woman took about just taking her down.
yeah, right.
And she was like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
like this is hard enough. I'm fighting like for my position here against men who don't think I should be here every day because I'm not a guy. And now this woman's come in who's supposed to be kind of like, women we're united and we can do everything." And it was actually the woman who did more damage to her in the office than
Mm.
anybody else. And
And
it was,
how is that damage done? So Jordan Peterson talks a lot about how men contend with each other and how women contend with each other and how different it is. So men will go at it verbally, and maybe if the verbalization becomes aggressive enough, they might even go at it physically. They might even have a physical fight if it gets to that. Whereas women don't seem to do that. It seems like, and this is where we start to delve into the darkness, the shadow and the darkness of the sisterhood, if we like.
mm,
Um, and that is and I've observed this in workplaces and I've seen this and I've heard it from women as well,
mm,
right? It's almost this real devious, cunning, underhanded manipulation of things, people, circumstances in order to undermine this other woman in the same circle as them so that they make themselves look better whilst almost, you know, trying to push the other one out.
mm.
Is
It's
that what happens?
insecurity, right? Insecurity. So and it is, I think when women go against women, there is an
There's a
invisibility cloak
viciousness to
around
it, isn't there?
it.
Sorry, what was
Invisibility
it?
cloak around it.
Yep.
It's very, very subtle, and it's almost too subtle to the men in the room. you know. So that's the other
What are you
thing
trying to
as
say, Helen?
well. I
Here's
think
another
that
woman saying men are stupid.
no, I'm saying that you've got a different vibration going on when it comes
I
to this
know. I get it.
the dismantling is obviously at a different level to which men operate at. Men
Yep.
are just not looking at that. So there can be a real kind of clever kind of pull down that can be systematic. And for the other woman, they can see it, but
Mm,
it's almost like being gaslit, really, because
yep.
it's not visible unless you're in it. And
Mm,
so it can be very, very destructive. And I've counseled a few of my girlfriends through this because I'm not in corporate anymore by any means. I work with high level CEOs, etc., but I don't work in a corporate environment. And I have helped female friends who said, I've approached this woman, I've tried to be friends with her, and what ends up then is that whatever friendship she thought they had was then used against her in some way. So there's definitely an issue between women as to the non-mums and the mums at work. There's a real problem with that there's this kind of eye roll about women who are mums, and the mums are under even more pressure to not look like they're a mum because they need to be as professional as possible.
yep.
And so there's a part of them they're kind of hiding all the time in that environment. And that brings me then as well to mums in the schoolyard, different kind of energy again. There's a lot of what happens in schools when you kids, the mean girl, happens in the adults. It's
Mm,
just
mm.
literally an age gap. And
Yeah,
you see
yeah,
the
yeah.
same positioning running through. So you'll see the one who was kind of mean running the group is the same person in the adult group. And there are people who are trying to impress her, make sure that she likes them because they're seen as a real power player. There's people who become kind of like servants to the school, and the school loves them and appreciates them. But I wonder whether they get exhausted with that level of service to be
Mm,
seen.
mm,
And so there's all of these different personalities playing out. And the thing is there's room for all of it because at some point, all these kind of roles are needed in a way. but if they were supported by the other women. So I
Yep.
know for myself, I had a real issue making friends in the schoolyard. When I first dropped my son off at school, I've got 4 children. As you know, I'm my oldest now. When he was in year 1, I would go for the school pickups and stand outside the classroom. And then after a little while, when he got sorted, then he would go into an after school in the same school, and I'd pick him up an hour or so later. And then I went to one of the reading mornings or something. I had a couple of weeks off work, and one of the other mums turned and went, "Oh, you're his mum. Yeah, that makes sense because he's always quite desperate for attention."
They actually said that to you.
To my face. And I was like, "Oh."
See,
And
guys,
you know,
guys wouldn't,
all,
guys
yeah,
wouldn't say that. Women seem to be
but it's
cool.
like this smiley smiley. I'm just gonna like assassinate you in a smiley face.
Wow,
And
that
and
is savage. That
of
is
course,
savage.
I I mean, I was a new mom. Like I had 2 children by that stage. Lila, I
Yep,
think, was about 2 by that stage. But it was like, oh, you know, and I felt angry. I felt
yep.
upset. I felt concerned and worried. I There was a part of me that wanted to show that I was a really great mom, and yet I didn't want to buy into that because I just thought, no, that's actually really kind of awful. There was
Wow, Helen.
another lady where I'm kind of a free person. I kind of like my kids to adventure around. I want them to touch things, feel things. I want to touch things and feel things. Why wouldn't they when they're new, you know?
Yep.
So I look at that and I kind of go, yeah, wow, that's great. And we'd gone to a coffee morning, which um, I kind of struggled with a little bit because there would be gossip, and I didn't really like that. But at the same time, there were some ladies that I really liked. So I went to the this coffee morning, and my child was roaming around, and I was like, "That's great," and just kind of bring them back when it looked like it was getting out of control. And later on that day, a lady brought me a harness to the school
I'm
pickup.
telling you,
I
Helen,
thought you might
some
need
of
this.
these,
And I was
some of
like,
these
"Oh,
stories.
a lead." Great.
Yeah, let me put that around your neck. So,
So
so
there's this subtleness that if you're really thin-skinned, you can be, and you're worried about your impression as a mum, you could be racked with anxiety. And I can see mums trying to kind of prove that they're great mums. And
do you think
and
that's subtle? Do you think that doesn't sound subtle to me? So when somebody says to you, "Oh, that explains why your son's that way," and look, here's a harness so you can control your child, and and I'm like, when I said before, men don't do that. So men will maybe think this stuff. We will think this stuff, but we'll never say it. Whereas it
mums at
feels
the
like,
school are different to the corporate women.
yeah,
So for mums, it's kind of like you think you're important, you're not as important as I am because I'm a mum. This is my playground,
yeah, this is
you
my
know?
domain.
And there's this kind of territory thing. And then lo and behold, if I should actually talk to one of the dads as a single woman, because then the lady's right there. "Oh, so you've met my husband?" "Yes, I have." And wasn't really finding him slightly attractive, but I just thought we'd have a conversation. You know what I mean? It's this
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like, you're obviously here to take him and he's mine. There's this real kind of thing about being single as well. So there's this noticing about, and it all comes from this nervousness. Are you better than me? Have you got something that I should be worried about? Do I need to prove that I'm better than you? And so, what effect that had on me for a number of years is that I actually shrunk my personality down
yep.
considerably, so that when I went into those spaces, I made sure that I spoke just purely about the other person and concentrated on making them feel really great about themselves. "Wow, you're so amazing at that. That's really terrific." But in the middle of that, I actually lost my own ability to show up as myself in that space. So that was not really good,
Mm.
but it took me quite a long time to change that approach because I just found it so much easier. And I actually used to run a live show called What Happens If We Never Get Our Shit Together. And I would stand on stage and talk about some of the realities of being a woman and what that really looks like. I spoke into the authentic space of it being difficult.
Mm.
And I laughed with the women in the room saying, if you've got children under 6, you don't have your shit together, and let's not pretend. Let's just own it,
Yep.
and
Yep.
let's laugh about what goes wrong. And then I spoke about some of the things that have happened to me in schoolyard settings, where I was told by one lady when I was discussing this with somebody, I said, I feel that, like, just even wearing heels into the playground, I feel a little bit like I'm hated for it. And I said, I
Mm.
don't know whether I'm being paranoid. And she went, oh, no, you'd be hated for it. I would hate to see a woman walk into my school with stilettos. That's just showing off. And I was like, okay. But I loved her honesty to me. And we had a really, really great discussion about it. I didn't mind her saying that
Mm.
to me. It was a
Mm.
way of me feeling like, yeah, I haven't got it wrong. That is how another woman feels. And I could respect her approach to it. I didn't
Yep.
necessarily agree, but I loved having that chat with her. So I was talking about a number of these things on this stage show, and there was a few women in the audience that were actually mums at the school. And I noticed afterwards there was a lady that didn't leave, and then it got to the end of the night, and I chatted with her, and we walked out into the car park, and she turned to me and said, "I'm one of the women that you talked about, aren't I?" And I said, "Look, I think we have had a disconnect, but that's okay." And she apologized, and she got really emotional, and she said, "I just don't feel good about myself.
Mm.
And looking at you sometimes made me feel bad about myself, and I
Yeah. Right.
projected that all over you." And I was really emotional, and I hugged her and I said, "Look, there will be a certain level of defense that I'm carrying in this space as well, because of how I've been treated over the years. So I'm sorry that you probably feel that as well,
Mm.
that there's this, and obviously our energies have clashed." And so we
Yep.
both took responsibility for showing up in that space in that way. And I'll never forget that. It was a really special thing to just have it spoken about truthfully, and to have it acknowledged that this is what happens, that we get challenged by people, and we can get made to feel bad or not good enough, and all of that is not necessarily a real kind of character trait of that woman. It's almost a fallout from our society's expectation on women.
Yep.
And I had this real softness for
Mm.
this woman, and it actually changed my dynamic when I went into the school, because I felt that no longer was I kind of, is this my story, or are just people being mean? It kind of confirmed that we're all doing something that's difficult,
Mm.
but the way that people treat each other, it can be very difficult. And the more successful you become, or the more you're perceived to be beautiful or have it all,
Yep.
actually, the worse you get treated, and the more difficult it is, I think.
So it sounds to me. Thank you for sharing all that. That was really insightful, actually. Um, and while you were talking, I took some notes in regards to what you were saying, because it sounds to me like there's this underlying insecurity and anxiety around the image that women have of themselves, their relevance around other women, and this need for validation from other women as well. And they seek it in unhealthy ways, a lot of people, don't they?
Mm, mm.
Yep.
And a lot of it is about beauty. A
Yep.
lot of it is about
And
beauty.
it's superficial physical beauty, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's where then the masculine comes in, because you can have a bunch of women who are getting on fine in a room. A man walks in who's slightly attractive, that women might kind of want attention from, and the whole dynamic changes, and there becomes a competition for the male's attention or for the attractiveness, and instantly becomes this thing of like, you'll notice the woman who thinks she hasn't got a chance will change her energy. There'll be a person who knows that they are pretty attractive and that they could flirt, and that's that kind of outgoing, more flirty personality, and they'll kind of have a good laugh with the guy. It then makes other women feel a bit uncomfortable, and there'll be a prissiness that comes over those women. And you notice this dynamic, and you can sit and watch it. And then as well, if it's a husband of one of the women, you can feel the iciness of it. And there's almost a terror as well, as, am I going to talk to him, or am I going to be like a husband stealer, or what's that going to look like? And so it really does remove what you know about the woman as well. It's almost like a territorial kind of instinct sets in, even over the top of what you know about the woman. And for me as well, I've definitely been challenged where I've been, and I'm a very aware person, I'm a very conscious woman.
Mm,
So I notice these feelings. And and as I've aged as well, and as I change, when I go into rooms and I see really beautiful women, I can check in with how I feel about it. That it is challenging for me to see this really beautiful woman. There's a part of me that, like, wow, and then you have to kind of think, hey, you know, that's no better. There's no better or worse. There's just an
yep,
appreciation of her being beautiful.
yep,
I went to an event last week, and I had this woman that I just kept noticing, and not just beautiful, but her loveliness with how she interacted. And I actually stopped her towards the end of the day because she was right next to me, and I was looking at her, and I said, I'm sorry if you see me looking at you, but I have to say, you are so beautiful. And I said, you look amazing, but you're just glowing this really lovely warmth. And I said, I
mm,
just really want you to know how beautiful you are. And she started to cry.
mm,
And I said, oh my God, and I said, I mean it. And she was visibly moved. And I just thought, like, I could have been quite threatened by her,
mm,
but I actually could see her insides too.
yep,
And and that interchange was really special. And and it wasn't until, of course, it was something that came naturally to me to do. Afterwards, I thought, wow, that was massive impact. I wasn't expecting that. But earlier on in the event as well, I'd seen some women who challenged me in other ways. There was that real kind of um the clickiness of a group, and the chitter chattering over the top of people, and you can see when they're like looking people up and down, there's a, no, we're not going to speak. And there was just the dynamics in the room. I could see it all, and I just was in observance of all of it, just observing it all. And yeah, it's a really interesting mix, because there really is that mean girl thing, as well as all of the little girls that were in the room
yeah,
in women's bodies,
yep,
still challenged by the same things that they were challenged with at school, and therefore portraying them out in an adult fashion.
mm,
And really, when you start to look at it like that, your heart goes out to people. And as well, it keeps you in your power as well to not react.
yeah, of
Just
course.
go, actually, I'm not buying into that, because I'm not your little girl. But
Do you think do you think that softness that you showed and that acknowledgement that you showed to that woman at the event last week, that if more women were able to step into that, that kind of energy, that this dark side of the sisterhood may see more of the light of day, because we can learn to because women can learn to acknowledge each other for who somebody else is and maybe isn't, and who they are and maybe aren't, and what they struggle with, and be a little bit more honest with themselves. Because I think that when we're looking at the dark side of anything, what we're really looking at is a reflection of our own shadow.
mm, mm.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, look, it's like Facebook, you see all these perfect lives. The pressure
Yep.
is so intense to be one of those people. And this is the other thing that I said in this live show that I used to do. I said, I had a friend who was on Facebook. She had this beautiful dinner with her partner, and it was all so gorgeous. And I said, there was a part of me that was like, great. Like, it was just like lovely, because it was upsetting that I don't have that. But she's a great friend of mine. So, and I just said, I saw you post. I said, my God, darling, it looked beautiful. Like, I was so envious, and we laughed about it. And she said, oh my God, we had a huge scrap on the way home in the car, and he slept in the spare room. And we both laughed. And I told this to the crowd of ladies, and instantly there's this kind of like relaxing into the like imperfection of it all,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just the ability to give permission that this is what it really looks like sometimes, and that that's okay.
Yep.
That the connections in that room after we had these discussions and the conversations that we had were so rich and so validated. And there was a lady who started speaking about, because I ran about 5 or 6 of these. One night there was a lady started chatting about something that had happened to her that had been triggered by something I'd said. And her best friend was with her. She'd been her best friend for about 15 years. She turned around, she said, I never knew that about you. And she said, well, we don't talk like that. And
Mm.
she said, now I get why you're so big on such and such. That totally makes sense to me. Oh my God. And they had this hug,
Yep.
and their relationship was quite different from that moment. So it's almost that we need to, as women, we need to give each other permission to be imperfect and to unravel, to have laundry on the floor. I mean, I have, when my twins were little and I had like, teenagers, and oh my God, the house was a mess. And people walk in, and I said, this is not an example of me not coping. This is me saying, I'm not doing that because I need to get my head together. I
Yeah.
didn't care what it looked like. I wasn't there to impress anybody. I wanted to show up with a good disposition for my children,
Mm.
and whatever I needed to do to be there present for them and to get them places, then that was secondary.
Yep.
My mental health and my happiness for them was key. But yet I had women who saw the mess and would think that I didn't have it together. But
Mm.
yet I could go to somebody else's house that's spotless, and yet their mind is terrible. They don't get along with their partners. They're on antidepressants. They're yelling at their kids.
Mm.
So I think we really need to redefine as well what it looks like to be coping, and what it
Yep.
looks like to be a healthy woman with healthy relationships.
Yeah, cool. So if you could summarize the dark side of the sisterhood based on our discussion, all the things that you've said today, which I think it's given me a bit of insight into you as well.
Mm.
Isn't that
Oh,
interesting?
goodness.
So, so how would you summarize that in conclusion, Helen? What would you say about the dark side of the sisterhood? And not just what would you say, but how would you say women could start to begin in their own circles to heal
Mm.
this?
Well, every woman knows this exists. And if they
Yep.
say that they're offended by what I've said, I'm really sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry.
You're not really
Because
sorry, Helen.
that's
Don't.
right. I'm sorry, not sorry. Because it's just, look, we've all seen it. We've all been part of it. We've all been hurt by women.
Mm.
Um, and as well, there's people that aren't our women, which we don't have to be friends with everybody.
Yep.
But there's a point where it would be lovely to fall into the trust of somebody who can see
Mm.
you in pieces and not kind of enjoy it.
Yep.
Not kind of go, great, they're falling apart and I thought that they were better than me, so that puts me in a great place.
Yep.
I've witnessed that before. And so it's really about finding the balance in you that you're happy with, and therefore being relaxed as how that presents to the world. So if you're accepting of the way you show up fully, that's the only thing we can be responsible for,
Mm.
then whatever anybody else does with that is their problem, really. So it's almost about removing yourself from being part of the mix,
Yep.
and then going into it with an energy of openness to kind of call it for what it is. And then everybody kind of goes, oh, thank God you said that. That's great. And now I can kind of like you because you've just said that your morning was shit. And so
Yep.
was mine.
Yep.
Instead of going, yeah, great, we're going on holiday, and yeah, so-and-so just got his college degree, and yeah, my family's just beautiful, and we all had vegetables last night, by the way. No, let's just kind of say, I didn't even get to dinner last night, went and did a big shop, got home and had pizza, we were so knackered. That's
Yep.
what it really looks like.
Mhm.
And so the more people who just show up authentically because they're comfortable with that they're not interested in impressing anybody, then the more people can just fall into the imperfection. and to fully know that the more you support other women, the more you support the baseline energy for yourself
Mhm.
as well.
Yep.
Um, and for women, for what we're trying to fight for overall, which is to be connected, to be seen, to be
Mhm.
accepted, and to
Mhm.
be good enough.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Mm.
Thank you, Helen, for a glimpse into the dark side of the sisterhood.
That's my shadow. Woo!
There it is, and there it is. And next week we're gonna go into mine when we talk about the dark side of the brotherhood.
Mm.
That'll be interesting too. Cool. Thanks, Helen.
Pleasure. And I'd be interested to get any feedback from any women that are listening, as to what their experience is with this. And if it was a trigger, that's still really good discussion to have. If it was something that you were like, oh my God, thank God you said it, then I'd love
Mm,
to hear that too, because
yep.
I think this is an ongoing conversation. And if anybody wants to delve into it more, we can do that here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In the comments, and make
Yeah.
sure you like and love and subscribe and all that sort of stuff too.
The
Thank you,
quintessential
Helen.
marketer. Thanks,
Exactly.
Michael.
See you next week.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.